In 1877 Colorado, Caleb Turner held his newborn son against his chest as the child's breath grew weaker with each passing hour. 3 days without milk, 3 days of watching the only piece of his dead wife slip away. He begged every woman in town for help. They laughed at him. They locked their doors. One woman even threatened to set the dogs on him. The town had already buried his wife. Now they were content to let his son die too. But on the coldest night of winter, when all hope seemed lost, a grieving stranger opened her door. A widow who had lost her own baby just 2 months before. A woman the whole town called cursed. What happened next would defy everything that small town believed about family, love, and redemption. This is not just a love story. This is a story about two broken people who refused to let death win. Sometimes the people society rejects become our greatest blessing. And sometimes love finds us not when we are looking for it, but when we are simply trying to survive. This story reminds us that healing does not mean forgetting. It means making room for new love alongside old grief. Two broken hearts can learn to beat together. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this touches your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Caleb's son had not eaten since he was born. The infant was fading, his tiny breaths growing shallow against his father's chest. He refused cow's milk, he refused sugar water, and every woman Caleb begged for help turned him away. The midwife claimed she was too old. A mother with 8 children of her own said she barely had enough for her own family. Soon, the polite refusals turned ugly. Word spread through town that Caleb Turner was begging for breast milk, and the whispers turned into cruel jokes. He overheard Dutch Matthews, a bitter man who had once courted Mary, say that Caleb deserved his suffering. The words were a knife in his heart, but his son stirred weakly in his arms. He had no time for pride. He only had time to save his child. He swallowed his rage and kept walking, searching for a single soul who would show his innocent son some mercy. By nightfall, the town had made its decision. They saw him coming and locked their doors. One woman told him her husband would set the dogs on him if he returned. It was then Caleb finally understood. They were not just refusing to help. They were waiting for his son to die. He found himself on the frozen steps of the Grafton church, the doors bolted shut. He hadn't even given the boy a name. He was afraid that speaking it aloud would make the death real. With the baby lying still and silent against his chest, Caleb finally broke down and cried, "Mr. Turner." A voice sliced through his despair. A young woman holding a lantern was walking toward him through the snow. It was Margaret Flynn, the postmaster's daughter. She hurried up the steps, and the lantern light revealed the desperation on Caleb's face and the deathly pale skin of his son. "Lord, have mercy," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "I have tried everyone," Caleb said, his voice raw. "No one will help me." Margaret's expression hardened with anger at the town's cruelty. "I cannot give you what you need," she said, "but I think I know someone who can." A tiny spark of hope flickered inside Caleb's chest. "Who?" he asked. She told him about Elena Moore, a widow who lived in an old house at the edge of town. "She lost her own baby a couple of months back," Margaret said softly. "Her husband left right after. People in town, they tell unfair stories about her because she's alone." She paused, looking Caleb straight in the eye. "But she knows what it is like to lose a child. She is not cruel like the others." Margaret pointed the way. Caleb looked down at his son, whose life was fading with every passing second. He had no other choice. He stood up and walked into the darkness toward the widow's house. "Just past the livery, find the house with the blue door." Margaret's words were all Caleb had left. He pushed himself into the bitter wind, the whole world having turned its back on him. His wife, Mary, was gone, and their newborn son was now fading in his arms. He clutched the tiny bundle, shielding him with a thin, patched coat. All that mattered was reaching that blue door. Through the driving snow, he saw lamp-lit windows filled with happy families, a life that was stolen from him. The baby gave a weak flutter against his chest. Caleb hurried on, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. He finally saw it, a small house with a blue door. A wave of doubt hit him. He was about to ask a stranger, a grieving woman, for an impossible favor. But the baby in his arms had gone completely still. Fear pushed him forward. His numb hand could barely knock. He tried again, harder this time, yelling into the storm, "Please, help me! My baby is dying!" The door swung open so fast he nearly stumbled inside. A woman stood there, her eyes filled with a deep weariness. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice flat. "My baby," Caleb stammered, holding out the small bundle. "He's starving." Her gaze moved from Caleb to the bundle and back again. "Come inside," she finally said. "You're letting all the cold in." The parlor was warm and tidy, a small space trying to hold back a world of chaos. "Let me see him." Caleb's fumbling hands unwrapped the blankets. The baby's skin was a terrible, waxy color. Elena drew a sharp breath. "How long?" she asked. 3 days, Caleb replied. "My wife passed giving birth to him." In that moment, he saw a flicker of understanding in her tired eyes. "Put him on the table," she instructed. As she looked at the child, her whole body trembled. "I lost my own boy 2 months ago," she whispered. "He was just 11 weeks old. My husband blamed me for it. He left." Caleb could only say, "I am sorry." "My body," she continued, her hands clenched into fists, "it still makes milk. A constant reminder of him." Her eyes met his, full of defiance. "The folks in town already think I am cursed." "I do not," Caleb said. "I know you opened your door." Her composure cracked. When she touched the baby's tiny hand, his fingers twitched. Hope shot through Caleb. "If I do this," Elena said, "the gossip will be terrible for both of us." Caleb looked down at his son. "My life is already hell. Let them talk." After a long moment, she picked up the baby with practiced hands. "What is his name?" she asked. "He does not have one," Caleb's voice broke. "I could not if he was going to die." Elena looked down at the nameless child. "Well then," she said softly, "we had better make sure he lives." She settled into a rocking chair by the warm stove, her hands now steady. Caleb turned away to give her privacy, his heart pounding in the quiet room. The silence was terrifying. Was he too late? Then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound, the sound of his son nursing. Alive. Caleb's legs buckled, and he slid to the floor, overcome with a relief so powerful it felt like pain. He wept, not with grief, but with gratitude. As the storm raged on, the only sounds inside were the creak of the rocker and the steady feeding of a newborn. After a while, Elena's quiet voice broke the calm. "He is asleep." Caleb turned to see his son, peaceful and safe, his color already returning. He had some color now. Elena told him the baby had taken a good deal of milk and, more importantly, had kept it all down. Caleb stumbled over his words. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to," she replied, looking down at the child. "He needed help, and I was able to give it." But she explained that for the next few weeks the baby would have to eat every few hours, around the clock. Caleb quickly offered to pay with eggs and meat from his small ranch. Elena shook her head. "I just want this baby to stay alive. That is all." Caleb recognized the fierce determination in her voice, for he felt it too. "All right," he said. "Then we will keep him alive together." She gave one sharp nod and handed the child back to Caleb. "The snow is getting worse," Elena said. "You will need to protect him on the way back." Caleb looked out the window. I cannot take him back out in this storm. When Elena learned he was staying at a boarding house half a mile away, she struggled for a moment. You could stay here for tonight. There is a spare room. It is small but warm. Caleb knew the gossip it would cause, but the thought of taking his warm, sleeping son into the blizzard was unthinkable. Are you sure? He asked. I am sure, she answered, her mind made up. Let people talk. She showed him a small, clean room off the kitchen. I will wake you for the next feeding, she offered. You do not have to do that. Mr. Turner, she said gently, my body has woken me every 3 hours for 2 months. It is not a hardship. Caleb sat on the bed watching his son sleep. For the first time since his wife Mary passed, he felt a flicker of hope. Outside, the wind howled, but in this small room there was warmth and safety. He lay down beside the baby, placing his hand on the tiny chest to feel each and every breath. He could hear Elena moving about the house, another person wrestling with their own grief in the dark. He thought of them as two strangers, shattered by loss, connected by this one small child who refused to die. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight his son was alive. That was enough. Morning came gray and heavy. Caleb woke to the sound of his son crying, a strong and healthy cry that filled him with relief. The baby was not just surviving, he was demanding to be fed. A soft knock came at the door and Elena entered. She looked exhausted, but a certain softness had replaced the hardness in her face. Caleb handed her the crying baby. He watched as she settled in a chair to feed him, and Caleb began to turn away to give her privacy. Her voice stopped him. You do not have to keep turning away. This is how babies eat. It is natural. You are going to see it many more times. He knew she was right, but old habits die hard. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window to give her some privacy. Did you get any sleep? He asked. She admitted she had not slept much. You know you talk in your sleep? He tensed up. What did I say? You kept apologizing to a woman named Mary. Was that your wife? He could barely get the word out. Yes. He confessed he kept thinking he could have done something different to save her. She died giving birth to our son. The baby was breech, a 12-hour labor. He felt like he had failed her. Elena understood that kind of guilt. She felt she must have missed a sign that her own son was sick. She told him her husband blamed her for their baby's death. He claimed she must have rolled over on the child in her sleep. He needed someone to blame, and she was the only one there. 2 days after the burial, he left. He took everything but the house, since it was in her family's name. The town thinks my grief drove him off. Caleb grimaced. This town seems to think a lot of cruel things. You will learn that quick enough if you stay. Grafton is not kind to outsiders. Caleb thought about the way folks had treated him. I'm already learning. Then you should also know. If word gets out you stayed here, people will assume the worst about us both. Let them. Caleb's voice was firm. My son was dying, and you saved him. Nothing else matters. For the first time, Elena truly looked at him, and they shared a moment of understanding. They were both past caring about what other people thought. Survival was all that mattered. The baby finished eating, and she lifted him to her shoulder. A small burp made them both crack a small smile. He is a strong one, like his mother. Caleb's throat got tight. Mary was the strongest person I knew. He stood up, needing to move. I ought to get my things from the boarding house. Mrs. Carmichael is likely wondering where I am. Elena gave a dry chuckle. Oh, she already knows. That woman knows everything that happens in this town. So, you have a choice to make. This baby needs to eat every 3 to 4 hours. You can either walk back and forth from the boarding house day and night, or you can stay here where he will be warm and fed. You have to decide what matters more, Caleb, your reputation or your son's life. It was not a choice at all. He looked down at his boy, now sleeping peacefully. I'll stay, he said, if you will have us. Elena's face was like stone. I have my conditions. First, you will contribute. You can chop wood and help with repairs. You can work your ranch during the day, but you will be here at night for the feedings. Agreed. Second, this arrangement is strictly practical. People will talk, and I will not have my name dragged through the mud any more than it already has been. Of course, Caleb replied. Then Elena hesitated, showing a hint of vulnerability. When he is old enough for solid food, you will take him and go. No arguments. I cannot let myself pretend he is mine. I just cannot do that to myself again. So when the time comes, you have to leave. Caleb heard the pain in her voice. She was already building a wall against another heartbreak. He wanted to promise her it would be different, but he could not promise a future he could not see. Agreed, he said softly. She nodded, all business again. Then it is settled. You should go get your things. He wrapped his son in blankets and placed him in her arms. Their hands brushed, and he felt the calluses on her palms. Capable hands. I will be back in an hour. The cold morning air hit him hard. The storm had passed, leaving the world covered in a clean blanket of snow. It was beautiful, and it hurt him to know Mary would never see it. The town was already stirring. Folks were going about their day as if his own world had not just been torn apart and put back together. He was almost to the boarding house when a man named Dutch Matthews blocked his path. "Well, well," Dutch sneered. "Look who it is. I heard you spent the night at the Moore woman's place." Caleb tried to walk past him. "Get out of my way, Dutch." "That ain't very friendly, Turner. I am just worried about that little boy of yours. Can't be good for an infant to be around a woman like that." Caleb stopped cold. "A woman like what?" Dutch raised his voice for the crowd that was gathering. "You know what they say. Her husband left her. Her baby died under some mighty suspicious circumstances. Some folks think—" Before he could finish, Caleb's fist connected with his jaw. Dutch fell hard into the snow, blood trickling from his lip. "You finish that sentence," Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. "I dare you." Dutch scrambled away. "You're crazy. You implied that woman harmed her own child. That is a cruel lie. Elena Moore lost her baby, and she opened her home to a stranger to save my son's life when nobody else in this town would. So yes, I stayed at her house, and I will keep staying there as long as my boy needs her." He stared down the crowd. "Anyone else got a problem with that?" After a tense exchange with a man named Dutch, Caleb returned to the boarding house. Mrs. Carmichael, a stout widow who ran the place, was waiting for him. Her expression was a mix of concern and disapproval. "Mr. Turner," she said in a careful tone, "I heard about your son, and I also heard where you spent the night." Caleb simply said, "I am sure you did." "I do not judge you," she continued, surprising him. "But several of my boarders have expressed concerns. People get uncomfortable around a widower with a newborn. It reminds them too much of loss. In short, Mr. Turner, I cannot hold your room for you." He was being pushed out. "I understand," Caleb said. "I will collect my things." "I am sorry," she said, and she sounded it. "Mary would be proud of you." Away, fighting back the tears. His room on the second floor was small and simple. He'd been there a week, ever since Mary got too pregnant to travel from their ranch. The plan was to go home as a family. Instead, Caleb was packing his few belongings alone. His wife was gone, and his son needed milk to live. He packed a spare set of clothes in the leather bag Mary gave him on their wedding day. He carefully wrapped their only photograph, taken on their honeymoon, inside a shirt. The last thing he packed was Mary's Bible. She had underlined one passage twice. Love endures all things. Mary lived by those words. Now Caleb had to do the same. He had to endure this. He closed the Bible and put it away. Downstairs, Mrs. Carmichael handed him an envelope, a letter from his brothers. He put it in his pocket for later. He needed to get back to his son. The walk back to Elena's house felt longer this time. The weight of his new life pressed down on him. He was moving in with a woman he barely knew, a woman whose husband had left her and whose baby had died. He knew folks would whisper, but what choice did he have? His son had to eat. Elena was in the kitchen peeling potatoes. The baby was in a basket nearby, awake and looking around. He looked so alive now, so different from the tiny child Caleb had carried through the storm. "You are back," Elena said. "I am," Caleb answered, setting down his bag. "So I guess I'm staying." "The ranch is how far?" she asked. 6 miles north," he said. "It is a small place. 50 head of cattle, a cabin, and a barn. It was ours," he corrected himself. "Mine, I mean." "I could ride out there to feed him," she offered. Caleb shook his head. "That is not practical. And the cabin roof leaks. I can't be out there alone with him if something goes wrong." "So you are staying here," she said, "if your offer still stands." Elena went back to her work. "You follow my rules and you can stay." "I will," Caleb said, moving toward the basket. He looked down at his son. "He needs a name." He thought for a moment. Mary had liked family names like Thomas or James, but another name came to Caleb's mind. "Samuel," he said softly. "It means that heaven has heard." Elena looked up. "Samuel Turner. That is a strong name." "Samuel James Turner," Caleb added, naming him after his own father. The baby wrapped his tiny fingers around Caleb's thumb. It felt like a promise to live. "He will need more clothes," Elena observed, "and diapers and blankets. I can ride out to the ranch tomorrow and bring back what we need." She pointed with her knife. "There is paper and a pencil over there. Make a list." They settled into a quiet routine. Around noon, Samuel began to fuss. Elena picked him up and sat in the rocking chair to feed him. Caleb tried not to stare, but he could not help it. It brought up a storm of feelings inside him. He felt grief for Mary, but also gratitude for Elena. To break the silence, she asked, "Tell me about your ranch." "Cheap land," Caleb said. "Mary and I came from Ohio. We wanted to build something of our own. The first winter was brutal and almost took Mary." "My husband and I came from Illinois," Elena said. "He chased silver dreams that never came true. When that failed, we came here. He hated this town. He hated being an ordinary man." "Is that why he left you?" Caleb asked. "Mostly he left because I was a reminder of his failures," she said. "Our son dying was just one more thing he could not fix. It was easier to blame me and leave." Caleb saw the bitterness in her eyes. A man who leaves his wife after losing a child is not a man at all. Their eyes met for a long moment. They both understood loss in a way they never wanted to. The afternoon passed slowly. Caleb kept busy with chores around the house, chopping wood and fixing a loose board on the steps. The physical work felt good. When he came inside, Elena had coffee ready. "You do not have to work so hard," she said. "It gives my hands something to do and my mind a rest," he replied. "Besides, you are saving my son's life. It is the least I can do." "I am not doing this for you." Elena's voice was firm. "Do not make this a transaction." "Then what is it?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "It is survival, for all three of us." "What are we going to tell folks?" Caleb finally asked. Elena didn't hesitate. "The truth. You are a man who needs help with his baby, and I am the one helping." When he worried they would not believe it, her voice went hard. "I quit caring what this town thinks a long time ago. You should too." He knew she was right. That night they ate in a heavy silence, the lamplight a small comfort against the ghosts of who they had lost. She handed the sleeping baby to Caleb. "He needs to know his father's touch." Caleb cradled his son, the weight of him both a comfort and a pain. "Your mama would have been so proud," he whispered into the quiet room. He made a promise to the boy that they would be all right somehow. He knew Elena planned to leave once the boy was weaned, but for tonight, under one roof, it felt like a start. For the first time, Caleb felt a sliver of peace. realizing he was not facing this nightmare all alone. Outside, the wind rattled the bare trees, but inside that small house, 3 people who had lost it all were just trying to survive. A new rhythm began to form. Every 3 hours, Samuel's cries would bring both adults running. Elena would simply appear and take the baby, her hands knowing just how to soothe him. Over the next week, Caleb made trips back to his empty ranch. He brought back the baby clothes his wife Mary had sewn, and the rocking chair she loved. He could not stand the thought of her things collecting dust in a silent home. Elena accepted each piece without a word, but he saw how she gently touched the stitching on Mary's quilts. She knew what it was like to put away things for a child you had lost. The town turned on them quick. By the second day, women were crossing the street to avoid Caleb. On the third, a note was nailed to Elena's door with a single, ugly word. Elena tore it down, telling him to save his anger for things that mattered. But Caleb saw the strain on her face when she went into town. The price for her kindness was high. On the 8th day, Reverend Michaels paid them a visit. He was a thin man of about 60, and Caleb had always thought him fair. The Reverend offered his condolences for Mary, then got straight to the point. He said folks were talking about the arrangement. He understood Elena had saved the boy, but a man living with an unmarried woman was causing a stir. The talk was not kind, he warned. The Reverend's face was all pinched up. This is not about what is right, son. It is about propriety. My boy was starving. Anger started to boil up in me. The community turned its back. She did not. So you can keep your propriety. Grief does not excuse this. Excuse what? Keeping my son alive with the only help offered? Mary died to give me Samuel. I will not let him die to soothe the feelings of folks who would not lift a finger for him. The Reverend softened his tone a little. There is another way. A widow in town could help. I already lost my room, and I am not dragging a newborn across town in this mess. He is safe right here. That is what matters. And what about Mrs. Moore's reputation? From the doorway, Elena's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass. She held Samuel in her arms, her eyes blazing. My reputation? Reverend, this town destroyed my reputation the day they blamed me for my own child's death. A few more rumors will not hurt me. I am only trying to help, he stammered. Are you? Or are you trying to feel better because your flock nearly let a baby starve? Her voice was pure ice. Where were all you good people when Mr. Turner was begging for help on the church steps? The Reverend's face turned red. That is not fair. Elena let out a bitter laugh. You want to talk about fair? My son died in his sleep. My husband left me. And now you come here to lecture me for keeping another woman's baby alive. I am not lecturing. Yes, you are. You are punishing people for surviving in ways that make you uncomfortable. She stepped outside, holding Samuel close. This baby needs to eat every 3 hours. I can feed him. If that offends you, maybe you should ask yourself why feeding a hungry child seems so wrong. The Reverend opened his mouth, then shut it. He knew he had lost. I will pray for you both, he said, turning to leave. Pray for yourself, Elena shot back. We are doing just fine. They watched his buggy disappear down the road. The fight seemed to go out of her then, and her shoulders slumped. Samuel started to fuss. He is hungry, she said softly, and went inside. I stood there a long moment, feeling the cold. Inside, she was already in Mary's rocking chair with Samuel nursing peacefully. I started some coffee just to have something to do. I am sorry, I said. I did not mean to bring trouble here. You did not bring it. It was already waiting for me. Her voice was tired. I have been the town outcast for 2 months. At least now it is for a good reason. I brought her a cup. For a week we had learned this small dance around each other, making the tight space work. What if he is right, I asked. What if there is a better way? She looked at me over her cup. Do you want to leave? No. But I do not want to make your life harder. My life is what it is. My son is gone. My husband is gone. This town hates me. At least with you and Samuel here, the house is not so quiet." She paused. "Besides, he is getting stronger. Why would we mess with that? Because folks are cruel. They will keep pushing." "Let them try," she said, shifting Samuel to her shoulder. "I have survived worse than gossip." But later that night, I heard her crying through her door. Soft sounds she was trying to hide. I wanted to knock to offer some comfort, but I knew I had no right, so I just walked away. The second week, a snowstorm buried Grafton under 2 feet of white. I was trapped at Elena's house for 3 days. I spent the time fixing things. A leak in the roof, rotted floorboards, a busted fence. She watched me work, and I couldn't figure out what she was thinking. One night, we were having supper when Samuel started crying. It was not a hungry cry, but a sharp, pained sound. Elena snatched him up from his basket. "What is wrong?" I asked, my heart jumping. "I do not know. He feels warm." She pressed her lips to his forehead. "Too warm." Fear, cold and sharp, shot right through me. The word she did not say hung in the air. Fever. We spent the next hour terrified. Elena held Samuel and I paced the floor. By midnight, we were both worn out and scared to death. "Should I get the doctor?" I asked. "The roads are a mess," she whispered, rocking the baby. "Let us wait for morning." By morning, his temperature was normal, and he was eating like he was starved. The relief was so heavy you could feel it in the room. I realized Elena had been up all night, watching his every breath. "You need to sleep," I told her. "I will watch him." "You do not know what to look for." "Then you teach me." So she did. She showed me how to check for fever, how to know if he was in trouble, what to do if he stopped breathing. It was vital, terrifying stuff. "If he turns blue, you run to Doc Morrison's," she said. "Bang on that door until he answers." "Understood." With that, she went to her room, leaving me alone with my son. That scare changed things. Elena started teaching me all the things a mother knows. How to change a diaper, how to swaddle him up tight, how to hold him just right. "Mary would have been better at this," I said one day, struggling with a pin. "Mary is not here." "You are," Elena said gently, guiding my hands. "You are doing fine." "I feel like I am one mistake away from a disaster." "That is called being a parent," she said, and her voice was soft. "The fear never really goes away. You just learn to live with it." I looked at her then, and I saw all the pain she was carrying. She had been a parent too, and she had learned to live with it. Model T. Elena knew all the old ways to care for a baby, skills she had learned for her own child who was gone. Now she was teaching them to Caleb, preparing him for the day he would take Samuel and leave her alone again. He tried to apologize for making her relive her pain. Elena stopped him right there. She told him this was her choice, and her choice alone. In that moment, Caleb understood. This arrangement was not just saving his son, it was saving her too. It gave her a reason to get up in the morning. They were saving each other. That night, Caleb wrote a long letter to his brother, trying to explain the strange new shape of his life. A few days later, a fragile peace settled over the house, but it was not meant to last. Caleb was in the general store when Dutch Matthews and 2 of his friends walked in. Dutch still had a bruise from where Caleb had hit him before. He started running his mouth loud enough for everyone to hear, making nasty comments about Caleb and the widow playing house. Caleb told him to watch his mouth. Dutch just grinned, saying he had witnesses this time. Before Dutch could finish his next insult, Caleb's fist was flying. The other men grabbed Caleb, twisting his arm behind his back. The sheriff arrived in minutes. He was a heavy man who looked more disappointed than angry. He listened to both sides and then told Dutch to clear out. Then he said to Caleb, "You come with me. We need to have a talk." In his office, Sheriff Bennett said he was not going to arrest him, but Caleb could not go around starting fights. The sheriff had known Mary and knew Elena had been through a lot, but this situation was a problem. Caleb tried to explain that his son was dying and she had saved him. The sheriff nodded. He was not saying Caleb did wrong, but he had to be smart. Then he asked if Caleb had thought about making the arrangement official. He meant marriage. He said it would stop all the talk and make everything proper in the eyes of the church and the law. Caleb was stunned. He had just buried his wife 2 weeks ago. Bennett said he knew it was not ideal, but it would solve a lot of problems. He said folks marry for practical reasons all the time. This would be for the boy's welfare and her reputation. Caleb just stood up and left, the sheriff's words chasing him all the way home. The sheriff's suggestion felt like a punch to the gut. Marry Elena? It made a certain kind of cold, hard sense, but it also felt like a betrayal of his late wife, Mary. He found Elena in the kitchen, rocking baby Samuel. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. He told her everything, how the town was closing in. Her face grew still as she listened. A marriage of convenience, she said, her voice flat. She understood his hesitation. Her own marriage had ended badly. But then she looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. She knew the practical side of it. They were already living like a family. She admitted she might be willing to do it, if it meant keeping Samuel safe from small-minded gossip. 2 nights later, the choice was ripped from their hands. A hard knock on the door brought Sheriff Bennett to their porch, his face grim. The town council had met. Spurred on by a man named Dutch Matthews, they had issued an order. You marry Mrs. Moore within 1 week, or you find other arrangements for that baby. Caleb felt the blood run cold in his veins. They can't do that, he said. The sheriff just shook his head. They just did. They were calling it a moral hazard. He gave them 7 days. When the sheriff left, Elena was standing right behind Caleb. I heard, she said softly. They both knew there was no way to fight it. So they talked it out, laying down the rules like business partners. They would marry on paper to protect Samuel. They would keep their separate rooms and expect nothing more from each other. Once the boy was old enough, they could quietly go their separate ways. It was a clean, emotionless plan. But during those days, Caleb started to truly see Elena. He saw her patience with Samuel, her quiet dignity against the town's judgment, and the sad, sweet songs she sang to rock the baby to sleep. On the 6th day, Caleb rode out to Mary's grave under the big cottonwood. He spoke to the frozen ground, telling her of his impossible choice. Then he remembered the last promise he ever made her. If something happens to me, she had said, you do whatever it takes to keep our baby safe and loved. That was his answer. On the 7th day, he and Elena stood in a dusty office. With a few simple words, the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife. There was no kiss, just signatures on a piece of paper that changed everything. That night, nothing felt different. They ate supper like always while Samuel slept. The only sign of their new life was the simple silver ring on Elena's hand. As they cleaned up, she thanked him quietly for what he had done. But later, as Caleb lay in his own bed, he listened to his wife moving in the next room. They were bound together now by law and by necessity. Then Samuel started to cry. He heard Elena's door open and the soft murmur of her voice as she soothed their son. Caleb closed his eyes, realizing the sound of her lullaby through the thin wall was becoming the one thing that eased the edges of his own grief. 7 days. That was all it took for them to become husband and wife, a family on paper, if not in spirit. That marriage certificate did not change a thing inside their quiet house, but it sure changed how the folks in Grafton looked at them. The hard stares softened a bit. Even Dutch Matthews just kept his distance, though his eyes still burned with a deep-seated contempt. About 3 weeks into this new life, a letter arrived from Elena's sister in Illinois. Caleb found Elena in the kitchen, her face tight with anger. The letter crumpled tightly in her fist. Her sister had heard about the marriage and was full of concern, suggesting Elena had been trapped by a desperate widower. The letter was filled with sharp words dressed up as support. Catherine, the sister, questioned Caleb's intentions and Elena's state of mind. Elena explained that trying to tell her sister the truth would only make things worse, as Catherine always saw her as a victim making poor choices. Caleb looked her straight in the eye and asked the hard question, was she being used? Elena met his gaze without flinching. She told him no. Her first husband had needed her to be helpless to feel like a man. Caleb, however, would let her walk away tomorrow, even if it wrecked his own life. That was not using someone. That was respect. In that moment, Caleb truly saw the strength in Elena. He told her not to answer her sister because some people will judge you no matter what you say. That night, he sat down and wrote a letter to his own brother, trying to make sense of it all. He wrote that they were two people who had lost everything, just finding a way to survive together. The next morning, as the snow began to melt, a visitor came to their door. It was Margaret Flynn, the postmaster's daughter, the very person who had first sent him to Elena. Margaret stood on the porch holding a basket of preserves and offering a sincere apology. She admitted she had acted like a coward by not showing support when the whole town was gossiping. She said what Elena did for Caleb and the baby was a true Christian kindness that most people only talked about. Before she left, Margaret mentioned that they both looked less haunted than they did a month ago. Her visit was like the first crack in a dam. In the weeks that followed, a few other women came by, bringing small gifts and their quiet understanding. But a little kindness could not wash away all the hate. Dutch Matthews and his friends continued their whispering campaign. One afternoon in town, Caleb overheard two women saying something so vile it made his vision go red. They suggested Elena was unnatural and might harm the baby. He started toward them, but Sheriff Bennett caught his arm. The sheriff told him quietly that fighting every ignorant person in town was a waste of a man's life. He steered Caleb away, then turned to him with a serious gaze and asked how Elena was truly managing through all of this. Sheriff Bennett put it plainly. Surviving is not the same as living, Caleb. There is a spring dance next month. You ought to take her. The idea felt wrong, but Caleb asked her anyway that night. Why in the world would we do that? Elena asked, her rocking chair stopping dead. To show them we have nothing to be ashamed of, Caleb said. We are not living a lie. We are married and we are raising a child. That is more real than most. I do not dance anymore, she said softly. Neither do I, Caleb admitted. Maybe that is why we ought to. Elena finally gave a slow nod. All right, but I am leaving if anyone says a single cruel word. In the following weeks, she altered an old blue dress, the needle a tiny flash of light in the quiet evenings. One night, breaking the usual silence, she asked, "What was your wedding to Mary like?" Caleb was surprised by the question. It was small. We could not afford much. Her hands stilled. It must be hard being married to someone you do not love. He had to be honest. I care for you, Elena. But no, it is not love. She gave a short, sad laugh. I do not know what I want these days, except to not feel this ache. Caleb understood completely. We are a strange pair, are we not? He said. More at home with our dead than the living. Her eyes went to the sleeping baby. Except for him, she whispered. He is all life. That night, Caleb found Elena staring out the window into the dark. The house was dead quiet. He asked if she was having second thoughts about the dance. She told him she was having thousands. She said they should stay home, that it was all a mistake. Caleb stood next to her. He told her it did not matter what other people thought. It only mattered what they thought about themselves. He said hiding would be like admitting they had done something wrong. Elena's voice was just a whisper. She asked if they had not done something wrong. She was feeding another woman's baby and living with her husband. She touched the simple ring on her finger. She knew it had belonged to Mary, his first wife. A cold knot formed in Caleb's stomach. He admitted it was true. He tried to explain that money was tight, and it just seemed like a practical choice. Elena stopped him. She understood it was all a practical arrangement. But when she said that last word, her voice cracked and he saw the tears in her eyes. Elena just said she needed to get some sleep. At her bedroom door, she turned around. She told Caleb that she did not think they had done anything shameful at all. Samuel was alive because they had decided to help each other. That was not shame. That was just survival. She closed the door before he could say another word. He stood there alone, feeling the weight of his thoughtless decision. He had used the symbol of his first love as a simple tool for his second. But as he lay in bed, he thought of Elena's tears, not Mary's memory. He thought of the strength she showed every single day. He realized they were both just broken people leaning on each other. And maybe that was better than two broken people falling down all alone. The town dance was held in the big wooden hall. When Caleb and Elena walked in, the music and conversation just stopped. Every single person turned to stare. Then Margaret Flynn walked right over and took Elena's hands. She said she was so glad they came and told Elena how lovely she looked. The chatter started up again, but quieter this time. Caleb could feel the whispers as they found a table. He kept a hand on Elena's arm, as much for his own balance as for hers. They sat for a long time watching the others dance. Caleb remembered the last time he had danced. It was 2 years ago with Mary. Elena spoke softly. She said he was thinking about his late wife. He asked if it was that obvious. She said it was, but only to someone thinking about their own lost love. They sat together in their shared sadness. Finally, Caleb said they should dance just one time to show everyone they were not ashamed. He stood up and held out his hand. For a second, he thought she would say no. Then she put her hand in his. The musicians began a slow, simple tune. He put his hand on her waist, and she felt stiff as a board. They moved awkwardly, two strangers who had shared a roof but never this kind of closeness. Elena whispered that everyone was watching them. Caleb just told her to let them watch. As they started to find a rhythm, Dutch Matthews stepped forward. His voice cut through the music. He shouted about the grieving widow and widower playing house. He started to say something ugly about Elena's lost baby. Before he could finish the thought, Caleb's fist hit his jaw. Dutch fell to the floor, his nose bleeding. The music screeched to a halt. Caleb's voice was cold and quiet. He warned Dutch to never speak about her son again. Not to mention him, not to think about him. He asked Dutch if he understood. Sheriff Bennett pushed through the crowd. He looked at Dutch on the floor. The sheriff said he saw a man insult a lady and get exactly what was coming to him. He asked if anyone saw it differently. The room was silent. Then Margaret Flynn spoke up. She said she saw Mr. Matthews harass Mrs. Turner and heard the awful thing he said about her child. A few other folks nodded in agreement. The sheriff pulled Dutch to his feet and told him to go home. Dutch glared at Caleb and Elena, then left without another word. He saw the tears on her face. He realized they were not for the insults she had endured, but for the unexpected kindness from her defenders. "I need some air," Elena whispered. They walked out into the cool night, not stopping until they reached her dark, quiet house. She turned to him, her face full of emotion. "You should not have hit him. He deserved it. Now you have made a true enemy." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "I have to fight my own battles." "We are married," he stated simply. "Your battles are my battles now." Her expression changed. "When did this marriage become real to you?" "I do not rightly know," he admitted. "It started as an arrangement, but it is becoming something else." "I cannot," she said, her voice breaking. "I cannot let this be real, because real things can be lost. I cannot survive losing anything else." "You will not lose, Samuel, I promise." "You cannot promise that," she cried. "My first son was healthy one day and gone the next. We do not get to keep the things we love." The grief she had held back for so long finally poured out. He pulled her into his arms and she collapsed against him, shaking with sobs. He held her while she wept for everything she had lost. And as he held her, Caleb felt his own walls begin to crumble. He had been so focused on survival that he had not allowed himself to grieve his wife, Mary. Elena's tears finally released his own, and they stood together in the darkness. Two people finally allowing themselves to break. When the storm passed, a quiet settled between them. "I am sorry," she said. "Do not be. I needed that as well." The walk home was silent, but it was a comfortable silence. They had seen each other at their weakest. and it had built a new kind of trust. At the house, Mrs. Henderson met them at the door with a fussy Samuel. "He will not settle for anyone but his mama," she said with relief. Elena took the baby, and he immediately quieted. Caleb sat and watched his wife and son. The legal terms were slowly turning into an emotional reality. As she cared for his child, he felt a permanent shift inside his chest. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked. "That maybe we are not as broken as we thought." A small smile touched Elena's lips. "That is either very wise or very sad." "It can be both," he replied. Samuel fell asleep against her, but she did not put him down as if she was afraid to let him go. Caleb understood that feeling. "We do not have to stay in Grafton," he said quietly. "We could go somewhere new. Start over." "You mean run away," she said. "This arrangement is temporary, remember?" "Does it have to be?" Caleb leaned forward. "Look at us, Elena. We share a home. We care for this child. We have defended each other. That is not temporary. That is real." "I do not know if I can do real again," she whispered. "It hurts too much when it ends. But what if it does not end? What if we build something to last?" Elena looked him straight in the eye. "You do not love me. You love Mary." "You are right. I will always love Mary," he said honestly. "But that does not mean we cannot love other people too. Love is not something that runs out." "You talk about love like it is a choice. Is it not? I chose to marry you. I am choosing to build this life with you every single day. Maybe that is what love is." Silence stretched between them, heavy with fear and possibility. Samuel stirred, breaking the moment. "I need to put him down," Elena said softly. She rose and settled the baby in his basket with practiced care. Caleb knew he had pushed for too much too soon. When Elena returned, she stood near her bedroom door. "I am not ready," she said. "I must be honest." "I understand." "Do you?" she challenged. "Because it looks like you are trying to replace Mary with me, and I will not be anyone's substitute." The accusation stung because it held a bit of truth. Was he just trying to rebuild the life he had lost? "You are nothing like Mary," Caleb said quietly. "She was soft where you are hard. She trusted people easily, where you see them with clear eyes. You are not a replacement for her. You are entirely yourself." Elena's expression softened just a little. "Then give me time to figure out who that self is. I have been a wife, a mother, and a widow. I do not know who Elena is under all of that. Until I do, I cannot promise you anything more than what we already have." It was a fair request. Caleb nodded, accepting her terms even though he wanted more. He sat in the quiet lamplight, listening to the soft sound of Samuel's breathing. Tonight had changed everything. They had said things that could not be taken back. For the first time since Mary's death, Caleb felt a glimmer of hope. It was not happiness, not yet, but it was a start. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, a real future was possible. In the other room, Elena prepared for bed. She was his wife in this strange deal they had made. But somewhere along the way, it had started to feel like more. They had cared for Samuel together and defended each other. The lines they drew had started to blur. He knew they had built something real from their shared grief. It was not a normal family, but it was theirs. The future was still a mystery, but for now, this was enough. Spring finally arrived, turning the frozen land green again. As the world came back to life, so did Samuel. At 3 months old, he was changing fast. He now offered real smiles that could light up the entire cabin. He watched everything with sharp eyes and had discovered his own hands, fascinated by his tiny fingers. He was becoming his own little person. Elena kept a small journal, writing down every milestone. Caleb once saw it open on the table. She had written that Samuel laughed for the very first time. He had been making funny faces, and the baby's laugh had filled the whole house with a beautiful sound. House. Caleb heard that laughter, and it hit him hard. He realized Elena was not just protecting her heart from loss. She was truly starting to love that baby boy. As spring thawed the land, the ranch needed his full attention. Fences had to be mended and cattle moved to greener pastures. One afternoon, he took a ride out to Mary's grave. Wildflowers were pushing up around the simple wooden cross. "I am figuring things out," he said to the quiet ground. "Samuel is healthy and growing. He has your eyes, Mary. And Lord knows he has your stubborn streak." The wind was the only answer. But Caleb no longer expected one from the dead. The living had to find their own way. "I think I am falling in love with her," he admitted, the words coming easier to a grave than to a person. "It is not the same as what we had. Nothing could be. But it is something real, and it makes me want to build a future again. I hope you would want that for us." He rode back to town as the sun was setting and found Elena in the garden. Samuel was sleeping in a basket beside her while she planted seedlings, her hands dark with soil. "You did not have to do that," Caleb said. "This was Mary's garden," she replied, leaving a streak of dirt on her forehead as she wiped away sweat. It did not feel right to let it go. He knelt beside her. "She would have liked that, and I think she would have liked you. You are both survivors." Elena's hands went still. "Do not say that. I am not looking for approval from a ghost." "I know that," Caleb said gently. "But for 4 months, you have acted like a temporary guest, like you will disappear the moment Samuel does not need you." "That was our agreement," she said sharply. "Agreements can change," he answered, putting his hand over hers to stop her work. "I am asking you to look at me, Elena. I want you to stay. I want you to be my wife for real." She stood up fast, pulling her hands away. "You do not know what you are asking." "I am asking you to take a chance on something real," he insisted. She picked up Samuel, who had started to stir. "And what happens when this falls apart? My first husband could not handle my grief. This town called me a homewrecker for keeping your son alive. Now you want me to open myself up to more pain for a pretend marriage?" "The only thing pretend is the wall between us," Caleb said, facing her. "I am not him. I will not leave when things get hard, because they are already hard and I'm still right here. We can grieve together, or we can grieve alone. I would much rather do it together." Silent tears started streaming down her face. "I am so tired of being scared." He closed the space between them, wrapping his arms around both her and the baby. She resisted for just a second. Then she leaned into him, the three of them holding on to each other against the weight of everything. "I cannot promise it will not hurt," he said quietly into her hair. "But I can promise you will not have to face it by yourself." Later that night, she appeared at his bedroom door, looking nervous but determined. "I have been thinking. I do not know if I can love you the way you loved Mary. I am not sure I have that in me anymore. But I can try, if you will be patient." Caleb crossed the room and took her hands. "I do not need you to love me like Mary did. I need you to love me like Elena does. I do not know what that looks like yet." "Then we will figure it out together," he said. A small, real smile touched her lips. "You said you would try," he reminded her. "That is a start." He watched her walk down the hall, and for the first time in months, he felt something new. It was hope. After that night, things began to change, slowly. They started to eat together and really talk. Small touches were no longer accidents. They were learning how to share a life, and the town took notice. "You look different," Margaret Flynn told Elena at the market one day. "You are not just surviving anymore, you are living." But not everyone was happy about it. Dutch Matthews, his nose still a little crooked, cornered Caleb by the general store. Playing happy family, Turner? Your wife is barely cold in her grave, and you already have a replacement. Caleb kept his voice low and steady. My family is none of your business. It is the whole town's business when you set a bad example, Dutch sneered. The only sin here is your own sour jealousy, Caleb said, stepping closer. You cannot stand that Mary chose me, and you cannot stand that Elena is helping me build a good life out of tragedy while you just stand there nursing your bitterness. Dutch's face turned beet red. Do you think you are better than us? Dutch had sneered. Caleb just shook his head. No, I am just a man trying to raise my son with a good woman. If you have a problem with that, it is your problem. He walked away, leaving Dutch fuming. The confrontation did not shake him. Instead, Caleb felt a sense of peace. He no longer needed the town's approval. The only opinions that mattered were from Elena and Samuel. When he got home, Elena was teaching Samuel to hold a small wooden rattle. It had belonged to her son. Is that wrong? She asked softly. Giving my dead child's toy to your son? Caleb shook his head. No, I think it is beautiful. You are not replacing him, Elena. You are just making more room in your heart. When I am ready, she asked, will you listen to me talk about my son? Of course, Caleb said. I want to know everything. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. His name was Daniel, she began. For the next hour, she told him all the stories she had held inside for so long. Caleb just listened, holding her hand when the pain became too much. When she finished, she felt lighter. Caleb spoke gently. I think Daniel would be happy that his mother found a way to keep on loving. You cannot know that, she whispered. No, he said. But I know Mary would want us to raise Samuel with love, not grief. When did you get so wise, she asked. I am not wise, he said. I am just tired of the sadness. He pulled her close, and this time she leaned against him, as if she truly belonged there. They sat on the floor with Samuel between them, a small circle of warmth against the setting sun. A new kind of family was being born. In the weeks that followed, Elena's laughter came more easily, and Caleb started looking forward to the future. One morning, he woke up to the smell of a special breakfast. Elena had made biscuits and eggs. I have been thinking, she said, her eyes avoiding his. I think you were right. This is real. I love Samuel. And, she took a deep breath, I care about you, too. I am not ready for everything that being a real wife means, but I am willing to truly try, if you still want that. Caleb crossed the room in 3 long steps and pulled her into his arms. Her into his arms. I want that more than anything. They stood holding each other, and for the first time there was no grief between them, no ghosts, no guilt, just 2 living people choosing each other with full awareness of what that choice meant. So what now? Elena asked against his shoulder. Now we build a life together, all 3 of us. The town will still talk. Let them talk. We know the truth. Elena pulled back enough to look at his face. And what is the truth? The truth is that we found each other in the worst moment of both our lives, and instead of drowning separately, we learned to swim together. That's not a scandal. That's survival. That's love. Love, Elena repeated, testing the word. Is that what this is? What else would you call it? Convenient, practical, born of necessity? Can it be all those things and still be love? Caleb touched her face gently. We didn't meet the way most couples do, but we're building something real anyway. I don't need it to look like a storybook romance. I just need it to be ours. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. You're ridiculous. You know that? So, I've been told. And you're too good for someone like me. That's where you're wrong. We're exactly right for each other. 2 broken people who figured out how to be whole together. They kissed then, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. It wasn't the passionate kiss of new lovers or the comfortable kiss of long married partners. It was something in between. Acknowledgement and promise and hope, all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, Samuel was crying from his basket, demanding attention as always. Elena laughed and went to pick him up, and Caleb watched them together, his wife and his son, feeling something close to contentment settle in his chest. The summer brought changes beyond their relationship. The ranch began producing again under Caleb's renewed attention. The vegetable garden flourished under Elena's care. Samuel reached 6 months old and began the transition to solid foods, marking the beginning of the end of Elena's role as wet nurse. Caleb watched Elena's face carefully during this transition, knowing it represented both freedom and loss. She'd saved Samuel by feeding him, but that feeding had also bound them together in the most intimate way possible. Ending it meant acknowledging that Samuel no longer needed her in that fundamental capacity. "How are you feeling?" he asked one evening as she prepared a bowl of mashed vegetables for Samuel. "Strange, relieved and sad at the same time?" Elena stirred the bowl absently. "For months, my body has been doing this one essential thing, and now it's not needed anymore. You're still needed, just differently. I know, but it's still an ending." She looked at him. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Perfect. Every milestone is an ending of something, even as it's a beginning of something else. They fed Samuel together, both of them getting more food on themselves than in the baby's mouth, laughing at his expressions when he tasted new flavors. This was their life now. The small domestic moments that added up to something larger than either of them had thought possible months ago. In July, Caleb made a decision. He sold the ranch. Elena was shocked when he told her. "But that land was yours in Mary's dream. You can't just give it up." "I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing something different." Caleb spread the sale papers on the table. "The ranch is 6 miles from town. If we live there, Samuel grows up isolated, and you're cut off from what little community you've built here. If we stay in town, I'm constantly riding back and forth, never fully present either place." "So you're selling?" "I'm selling the land, but keeping the cattle. There's a property on the edge of town, 5 acres with a good house and a barn. Close enough that you can walk to the market, far enough that we have space. We can run a smaller operation, keep chickens and a few head of cattle, grow vegetables. It won't be the ranch Mary and I dreamed of, but it will be ours. All 3 of ours." Elena stared at the papers, her expression unreadable. "You do that? Give up your dream for me and Samuel?" "It's not giving up. It's choosing better. Mary and I wanted the ranch because we wanted to build something together." "Well, I'm still building something together, just with you instead." He took her hand. "Unless you'd prefer the ranch. We can make that work too." "No, I want to stay near town. I want Samuel to have friends, to go to school with other children. I want—" She stopped, emotion thick in her voice. "I want what you're offering. A home. A real one." They moved in August, transporting their combined belongings to the new property. It had a spacious main house with 3 bedrooms, a well-built barn, and a garden plot that was already producing. The previous owners, an elderly couple moving to live with their daughter in Denver, had maintained it beautifully. Elena walked through the empty rooms with wonder, touching walls and windowsills as if she couldn't quite believe this was real. "We can paint," Caleb said, watching her. "Fix it up however you want. It's yours to shape." "Ours," she corrected. "It's ours." They spent the next weeks making the house a home. Caleb repaired loose boards and painted walls. Elena sewed curtains and made the bedrooms comfortable. They set up a nursery for Samuel, filling it with the crib Caleb had built, the quilts Mary had sewn, and the toys that had belonged to Daniel, the past and present mingling, creating something new. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with Samuel playing at their feet, Elena spoke quietly. "I'm happy. I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that again, but I am." Caleb pulled her close. "So am I. It feels disloyal somehow, to be happy when Mary and Daniel aren't here to share it. Or maybe it's the greatest tribute we can give them. Living fully, loving completely, building something good from the wreckage they left behind." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "I think they'd both want that for us." Elena was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I think so, too. September brought Samuel's first birthday. Elena organized a small celebration, just Margaret Flynn and Sheriff Bennett, and a few other people who'd shown kindness during the difficult months. They gathered in the new house, eating cake and watching Samuel destroy his first taste of frosting with enthusiastic glee. Look at him, Margaret said, smiling. Hard to believe this is the same baby who was dying in your arms 9 months ago. Caleb looked at his son, healthy, happy, covered in cake, and completely unaware of how close he'd come to not surviving his first days of life. It is hard to believe. You both did well, Sheriff Bennett observed, nodding toward Elena. Built something good from a bad situation. We got lucky, Elena said. Luck had nothing to do with it. You made choices, hard ones, and you stuck with them even when the whole town was against you. Bennett raised his glass. That takes courage. After the guests left, Caleb and Elena sat together, watching Samuel sleep in his crib, exhausted from his birthday excitement. A year ago, I was holding Mary's hand while she died, Caleb said quietly. I thought my life was over, that I'd never feel anything but grief again. And now I have you and Samuel in this house, this life. It's not what I planned, but it's good. Maybe better than what I planned. Elena leaned against him. Is it wrong that I barely think about my former husband anymore? That when I remember Daniel, it doesn't destroy me like it used to? I don't think it's wrong. I think it means you're healing. I used to think healing meant forgetting. But it's not that, is it? No, it's making room for new memories alongside the old ones. It's choosing to keep living, even though people we love didn't get that choice. They sat in the quiet nursery, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment of both their lives, and somehow built a family from that darkness. It wasn't the family either of them had planned, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was enough. Winter came again, bringing with it the anniversary of that terrible night when Caleb had collapsed on the church steps with his dying son. He woke early on that anniversary morning, careful not to disturb Elena sleeping beside him. She'd finally tentatively moved into his bedroom 2 months prior and went to stand by Samuel's crib. The baby slept soundly, his chest rising and falling in healthy rhythm. 15 months old now, walking, babbling, full of personality and life. A miracle, Caleb thought, not the religious kind, but the human kind. The miracle of two people refusing to give up, refusing to let death win. He felt Elena's presence before she spoke, her hand sliding into his. Remembering? She asked quietly. How could I not? A year ago tonight, I thought I'd lost everything. Instead, you found me. Caleb turned to her. Do you ever wish you'd kept that door shut that night? Elena thought for a spell. It's been hard, with all the town's talk and the fear of getting my heart broken all over again. She met his gaze, her eyes clear. But I don't regret that night. Not for 1 single second. She took a breath. I fell in love with you both. For the first time, she said it plain. I love you. I love you too, he answered, his voice heavy with feeling. It is not the same as with Mary, but it is just as real. I know, she whispered, and that is more than enough. As they watched their son sleep, Caleb felt the old grief finally settle into a quiet corner of his heart. There was room now for a new life. Just then, Samuel stirred, his face breaking into a wide grin as he reached for them both. As the sun rose over Grafton, they held him together. Mama, Samuel babbled, patting her cheek. That is right, darling. Papa, he said, reaching for Caleb. Papa is here too, son. They could not promise forever, but they could promise today. And that choice, made every single morning, was what made them a family, long after the town had forgotten what to whisper about. The talk around town about Caleb Turner and Elena Moore had finally quieted down. On a cold January night with snow coming down hard, They sat by the fire while their boy, Samuel, slept upstairs. Out of the blue, Elena asked, "Do you think we should have another one?" Caleb looked at her, his heart skipping a beat. "A child?" She nodded. "I know it might be too soon, but I want Samuel to have a brother or a sister. I want to give you a child born purely from our love." Caleb felt a lump form in his throat. This wasn't just about another baby. It was about Elena choosing to trust in their future, to risk it all again after losing her firstborn. He knew the fear she must be feeling. "I think," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "that you're the bravest woman I have ever known. And if you're ready, then I am too." 2 years flew by. Caleb stood in his kitchen watching Elena, who was 6 months along with their daughter. She was patiently showing Samuel how to handle breakfast eggs. The boy was focused, his little tongue sticking out as he helped his mama. This life they had, it was something special. It had been forged in heartbreak, but had blossomed into a love neither of them could have foreseen. It was a tough, real-world love, built by two people who had seen the worst of things and decided to keep on living anyway. "Papa, look!" Samuel shouted, holding up a perfect egg. "Doing a good job, son," Caleb answered. Elena glanced up and gave him a real smile, the kind that had been gone for so long. He smiled right back, a wave of thankfulness washing over him for this simple, perfect morning. Their story was one of beginnings born from endings. He understood now that Mary's passing had led him to Elena, and that their shared loss had brought Samuel into their arms. The worst night of his life had somehow become the start of his second chance. He had learned that real love isn't about trying to replace what you lost. It's about making room in your heart for what you found. "Come on and eat," Elena called, "before this boy decides the floor needs breakfast more than we do." Caleb sat down at the table with his family. With Samuel chattering away between them, he knew this was it. This was home, messy, imperfect, and absolutely real. It was more than enough. It was everything. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.